When you step back and stop chasing, explaining, or trying to fix the situation, something subtle but incredibly powerful begins to happen. Silence is not empty, it carries energy. And when you remove your constant presence from her life, you create a space she cannot ignore. At first, she may think nothing has changed. She may assume that you are still around, still waiting, still available. But as the hours turn into days and the days turn into weeks, that assumed presence begins to fade. And in that fading, awareness begins to rise. Humans are wired to notice what is absent more than what is constantly available. When something or someone is always there, it blends into the background. Your attention, your time, your energy, if freely given, becomes expected. But when you step away, your absence acts as a mirror, reflecting what she has been taking for granted. She begins to realize that the consistency, the calm, the depth, the way you held space emotionally, all of it is no longer there to soften her world. The gap suddenly becomes tangible, almost like a weight she can feel but cannot name at first. This is the first stage of realization. She starts noticing details she previously ignored. The way you listened, the way you made her feel safe, the way you grounded her in moments of uncertainty. These are not dramatic gestures, they are the subtle, steady qualities that create emotional connection. And when those qualities are missing, the contrast is stark. The emotional gap is not filled by fleeting attention, casual messages, or shallow replacements. It is an absence that forces reflection, whether she wants to admit it or not. At the same time, your silence communicates something unspoken but deeply felt. It tells her that you are not dependent on her validation. It shows that your sense of self is not tied to her approval. That kind of stability is magnetic even when invisible. She may not consciously understand it at first, but on an emotional level, she senses that you are no longer orbiting around her reactions or waiting for her to notice you. That realization begins to shift the dynamic in a way that words alone could never achieve. Silence also allows the mind and heart to process without interference. When you were constantly available, she had no reason to sit with her own feelings. Your presence softened the weight of her emotional responsibility, and in a sense, it allowed her to remain comfortable in indecision. But now, without your constant reassurance, she is forced to reckon with the reality of what she lost. Memories begin to surface. Emotional comparisons begin to happen. She may try to distract herself, but the truth of your absence has a way of breaking through. The energy of silence is quiet but persistent. It doesn't yell, it doesn't demand, it doesn't chase, it simply exists. And in that simple existence, she begins to notice the void that only you could fill. It is not about forcing her emotions, manipulating her actions, or creating artificial tension. It is about allowing the natural laws of emotional contrast to work. Absence highlights value. Consistency gone becomes remarkable. What was once ordinary now feels rare. In this way, silence is not passive, it is strategic. It allows emotional clarity to emerge without you needing to intervene. And that clarity is the first step toward recognition, reflection, and the eventual surprise that she never saw coming. Once the initial awareness of your absence sets in, her mind naturally begins to compare. Comparison is not a conscious decision at first. It's a subtle mental process that occurs when the emotional gap becomes noticeable. She starts observing her daily life through a new lens, even if she doesn't realize it. Conversations with others, interactions with new people, the way attention is given and received, all of it begins to highlight what she once had with you. That contrast, often overlooked while you were present, now becomes undeniable. She may meet people who are lively, attentive, or even flirtatious, and on the surface, these interactions might seem interesting. But when she measures them against the steadiness and depth she once experienced with you, a sense of lack starts to emerge. Excitement fades quickly when it lacks substance, and superficial attention cannot replace the emotional weight you carried. She begins to notice that the calm, grounded energy you provided, your ability to listen without judgment, to create safety without clinginess, to hold your own frame without pressure, cannot easily be found elsewhere. Comparison is amplified because absence creates space for reflection. Without your presence constantly influencing her environment, she has the mental and emotional room to truly feel what was lost. She starts replaying moments in her memory, focusing less on conflicts or disagreements and more on the consistency and value you brought. It is this comparison that turns casual reflection into regret. The human mind weighs emotional fulfillment, And when she realizes that new experiences fail to measure up, your value rises in her perception without you ever having to assert it. Your growth during this period intensifies that contrast. While she may be noticing gaps, she is also subconsciously aware that you are not static. You are moving forward, improving yourself, living independently, and maintaining composure. This evolution is not broadcast as a performance. It is simply lived, but its energy is unmistakable. People sense when someone is aligned with their purpose and values, and she cannot ignore that alignment. The contrast between her emotional experiences now and what you represented becomes increasingly clear. Comparison also triggers self-reflection in her. She starts asking questions: why does no one else feel the same? Why does no one else provide the calm and depth I had with him? Why do I feel unsettled despite all this attention? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary for recognition. They highlight the rarity of what you brought into her life, the steadiness, the consistency, the emotional reliability, and they plant the seed of understanding that what she lost was not ordinary. The subtle power of this comparison lies in its naturalness. It is not forced, it is not engineered, and it cannot be faked. She is processing her own emotions while you continue to live your life fully. That unmanipulated perspective allows the contrast to feel authentic and undeniable. The clarity that emerges is not about chasing her or convincing her. It is about her mind and emotions finally catching up to the truth. Your presence, your energy, and the emotional standard you set are rare, and she is now beginning to realize it. By allowing comparison to happen naturally, you shift the internal dynamic. She no longer sees you as replaceable or ordinary. Instead, she begins to recognize your unique value in a way that attention, chasing, or explanations could never create. And in that recognition, the emotional weight of your absence begins to settle deeply within her. Regret is an emotion that rarely announces itself immediately. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, and grows stronger over time as the truth of loss settles in. When she assumed that losing you would be simple, she believed that your presence could be replaced easily, that someone else could step in and fill the space you once occupied. At first, she might have tried to distract herself with attention from others, small pleasures, or even fleeting relationships, thinking that the emptiness could be replaced by novelty or new energy. But the more she experiences life without you, the clearer it becomes that what she let go was not ordinary. Regret grows because she starts noticing the subtle differences. Conversations with others feel shallow, lacking the emotional depth she once experienced with you. Attention from others may be frequent, but it is inconsistent and often superficial. The stability and calm that your presence provided cannot be artificially recreated. Emotional reliability, grounded masculinity, and a man who does not collapse under uncertainty are rare traits, and as she encounters others who do not embody them, the contrast becomes undeniable. The realization begins to hit. She didn't lose someone ordinary. She lost someone who brought balance, depth, and emotional gravity into her life. The emotional weight of regret is amplified because you did not chase her. You did not beg for her attention, explain yourself repeatedly, or react out of desperation. Instead, you remained calm, collected, and self-directed. This absence of need creates space for her mind to reflect. When you were constantly available, she may not have fully appreciated the steadiness you provided. But now, with that steadiness absent, her thoughts are forced to confront what she truly valued. She cannot ignore the emotional vacuum because it is no longer softened by your constant presence or reassurance. Regret is also born from comparison. She begins measuring the people and experiences in her life against the standard you set. Others may be exciting, charming, or available, but they cannot replicate the rare combination of self-respect, composure, and emotional reliability that you exhibited. She feels the difference without consciously naming it. The qualities she once overlooked suddenly become glaringly valuable because they are absent elsewhere. That absence sharpens the emotional contrast, and contrast is the birthplace of longing and reconsideration. This process is subtle and internal. It is not about confrontation or dramatic realizations. It is about her slowly becoming aware of the uniqueness she walked away from. Every time she experiences inconsistency, instability, or shallow emotional connection, she is reminded of what she lost in you. Your absence acts as a mirror reflecting the reality she dismissed before, and the mind cannot help but notice what is missing. Regret becomes inevitable when she realizes that replacement fails, not because of manipulation, but because the depth and steadiness you embodied are rare and not easily found elsewhere. The beauty of this regret is that it arises naturally. You do not have to provoke it or manufacture it. Your calm, your self-respect, and your choice to step back allow her emotions to realign with reality. And when regret settles, it is accompanied by awareness. She sees now that losing you was not simple, that your presence carried weight, and that what she dismissed was in fact rare and irreplaceable. And in this understanding, the emotional stage is set for reflection, reconsideration, and the subtle possibility of reconnection, all without you having to chase or convince her. Emotional control is one of the most powerful tools a man can wield in situations where someone is beginning to feel your absence. It is not about suppressing feelings or pretending indifference. Rather, it is about maintaining composure, grounding yourself, and responding from strength instead of reacting from need. When you resist the urge to chase, beg, or demand attention, you shift the entire energy of the dynamic. It communicates something far deeper than words ever could, that your value is inherent, not dependent on anyone else's validation. Most people fail to understand the subtle power of restraint. When emotions flare, the instinct is usually to react either by pursuing desperately or by retaliating with anger or frustration. Both reactions reveal insecurity. They signal that your peace, your happiness, or your sense of worth is contingent on someone else's behavior. But when you remain calm and composed, you signal the opposite, that your center is unshakable, that you do not need to manipulate or force outcomes, and that your life moves forward regardless of someone else's decisions. This kind of composure is magnetic. It creates a sense of stability and maturity that is difficult to ignore. By refusing to engage in frantic or reactive behavior, you naturally elevate your perceived value. She begins to notice, often subconsciously, that you are no longer governed by the chaos of need. Your silence and steady energy begin to communicate strength, confidence, and self-respect. It is no longer about chasing attention. It is about embodying presence in a way that draws recognition naturally. Emotional control also gives her space to process her own feelings. When you were reactive or overly available, she may not have had the mental or emotional room to reflect on your importance. Your responses were constant, predictable, and perhaps even taken for granted. But now, without that influence, the space you've created allows her mind to notice the contrast between your steadiness and the inconsistency of what she experiences elsewhere. This gap highlights your value, not through manipulation or drama, but simply through the absence of chaos. The power of control extends beyond mere perception. It reshapes the narrative she has about you. Past mistakes or disagreements are softened in her memory because your present composure reframes the emotional energy associated with them. She begins to remember not only your positive qualities, but also the way your presence made her feel grounded, safe, and understood. This reflection is intensified by the fact that you are not actively seeking her attention. She must confront her feelings without the safety net of your immediate reactions. By maintaining emotional control, you also reclaim authority over your own emotional world. You are no longer subject to the highs and lows dictated by her actions or responses. Instead, you set the tone. This self-mastery communicates subtle but undeniable power, and it often triggers respect, reflection, and sometimes longing. She begins to see the difference between a man who reacts impulsively and one who responds with clarity, and the weight of that realization grows over time. Ultimately, emotional control is not about manipulation, it is about alignment. It allows you to maintain your dignity, protect your energy, and elevate your presence without needing to chase. It is the quiet, steady signal that you are rare, grounded, and unshakable, and it is that signal, more than anything, that shifts the dynamic, opens space for reflection, and makes her realize the significance of what she once had. And in that awareness, attraction begins to rebuild on a foundation far stronger than any pursuit could have created. After maintaining your silence and emotional control, the moment you choose to reach out becomes incredibly powerful, not because of the words themselves, but because of the energy and intention behind them. One calm, grounded message, sent from a place of strength rather than need, has the ability to reopen emotional memory in ways that weeks of chasing never could. The key is that the message is not desperate, not manipulative, and not trying to force an outcome. It exists simply as an extension of your presence, a subtle reminder of the steadiness and value you carry. Timing is crucial. After silence, she has had the space to reflect on your absence, to notice the contrast between what she now experiences and what she once had. Her mind and emotions have had time to adjust, to process, and to recognize the void you left behind. That void is what gives your message power. You are not attempting to fill it with empty words or emotional pleas. You are simply entering that space from a grounded position, which makes your presence felt instantly. The tone of your message matters more than the content. It should communicate confidence, composure, and clarity. It should remind her, without saying explicitly, that you are not dependent on her attention, but that you are present in a way that is rare and centered. This type of energy cannot be ignored. Unlike reactive messages born from need, which often push people away, a calm and intentional message draws attention naturally. It triggers recognition, reflection, and emotional connection because it aligns with the emotional contrast created during your period of silence. What makes this one message so powerful is that it bypasses logic and speaks directly to emotion. She doesn't consciously evaluate it as a strategy, she feels it. She senses the stability, the composure, and the strength behind your words. This reminder, subtle as it may be, reawakens memories of your steadiness, your reliability, and the emotional safety you provided, qualities that are rarely found elsewhere. Your message becomes a mirror, reflecting what she missed and forcing her to reconcile it with the experiences she has had since your absence. This approach also establishes boundaries and communicates self-respect. By sending one grounded message, you are demonstrating that you are available, but not desperate. You are showing that you can initiate without chasing, reconnect without begging, and offer presence without needing validation. This balance is magnetic because it communicates strength and autonomy. She begins to perceive you not as someone who reacts to her whims, but as someone whose life moves forward with purpose, yet who can choose to share connection on his own terms. Finally, this single, calm, intentional text opens the possibility of emotional reconnection naturally. It does not manipulate, pressure, or demand a response. It simply reminds her of the man she once overlooked, the one whose energy and presence were rare. It rekindles recognition without forcing desire. The emotional impact of this approach is subtle but profound. It allows her to see, feel, and remember, while you maintain control over your own energy and life. And in this quiet, intentional reconnection, the stage is set for reflection, renewed respect, and the possibility of a deeper, more balanced connection. The most profound transformation in this entire process comes from detachment. Detachment is often misunderstood as indifference or emotional coldness, but it is neither. True detachment is about aligning your life and emotional state with yourself rather than with someone else's actions or reactions. It is about reclaiming control over your energy, your focus, and your peace, and refusing to allow external circumstances to dictate your worth. When you practice detachment, you operate from a place of power, clarity, and self-respect, and that energy alone creates an impact that cannot be forced or faked. Detachment allows you to stop obsessing over outcomes. You no longer spend mental energy wondering whether she misses you, whether she thinks about you, or whether she will return. You do not chase, you do not plead, and you do not manipulate. Instead, you live fully in your own purpose, growth, and self-mastery. This independence communicates value far more strongly than any attempt to provoke longing or remorse. When she senses that your life continues without being dependent on her validation, it naturally triggers reflection and curiosity. Your absence is no longer empty, it is filled with the energy of someone who is rare, grounded, and complete in themselves. Detachment also creates emotional space for her. When you were emotionally reactive, constantly checking in or seeking approval, you provided a predictable source of comfort. That constant presence, while well-intentioned, often prevented her from fully processing the loss or absence of your unique qualities. But when you step back with detachment, she has the opportunity to experience life without your constant energy buffering her. She begins to feel the contrast between your rare stability and the inconsistencies or superficiality she encounters elsewhere. That contrast sharpens awareness, amplifies longing, and allows emotional truth to surface naturally. Another powerful aspect of detachment is that it preserves your dignity and autonomy while simultaneously raising your value. You are not performing for her, reacting to her actions, or attempting to manipulate her emotions. Instead, you are living authentically, prioritizing your growth, and maintaining composure regardless of her choices. This authenticity is magnetic because it communicates that your presence is not available to anyone willing to demand it. It is earned through recognition of your value. She cannot ignore the man who walks with confidence and calm, independent of circumstance. Detachment also shifts the dynamic from neediness to influence. When you are no longer emotionally tethered to her actions, your absence carries weight. You are not creating tension or trying to control her behavior. Instead, you allow natural consequences to emerge. Her emotions, memories, and reflections begin to realign without coercion. She may realize what she lost, feel longing, or develop renewed respect. These outcomes are far more powerful than anything forced because they arise from genuine reflection rather than obligation. Finally, detachment allows outcomes to occur organically. Whether she comes back or not, you maintain your peace, your growth, and your dignity. Your emotional state is no longer dependent on her decisions, which creates a sense of freedom that is rare and powerful. Reconnection, if it occurs, happens on a foundation of respect, recognition, and genuine desire rather than manipulation, desperation, or need. Even if she never returns, detachment ensures that your value remains intact and that your life continues forward with purpose and stability. Through detachment, you reclaim your power, create emotional contrast, and allow life to reveal the truth of your rarity, and in doing so, you become unshakable, magnetic, and profoundly respected.